Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome once again to our beautiful JNForever family. We've become, I think we see more of each other than anybody else. We're back again this week. We make sure that everybody's happy and inspired and well. And we're always here to support and encourage everybody. We're a phone call away. By now, you all know the in-house rules. We're all so familiar with Zoom. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have it at our disposal. Save your questions. There will be time for questions at the end. You can also type them in at the box. I'm Jackie Chait. I'm the legacy manager for JNF Victoria, and leaving a bequest is a wonderful, benevolent thing to do especially for the generations to come, for children, grandchildren, and I'm always available for a confidential chat. And who better to inspire us at a time like this than the one and only Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf. I would like to say from a personal perspective that I've asked Rabbi Wolf to speak on several occasions, and he's always so incredibly kind and gracious and accommodating. He makes a plan and he comes up with these amazing topics, and this is really much appreciated. Thank you so much, Rabbi. So pretty much most of you would already know, but Rabbi Wolf is an unusual exponent of ancient wisdoms and cutting-edge psychology. He's internationally renowned as a highly entertaining lecturer and is a celebrated author of the best-selling Practical Kabbalah. He is a graduate of law and psychology, as well as a Lubavitcher Chassid. And I always say every Jewish parent hopes for one of those credentials in front of their unborn child's name, but all three, wow. He has a published repertoire of training materials on mindfulness, meditation, and relaxation response techniques. His works have been highly acclaimed by diverse world leaders, such as the late Rabbi Lord Sir Jonathan Sacks, the Dalai Lama, and the late Chief Rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, from whom he also received his rabbinical ordination. He has been described as a Jewish synthesis of Tony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, and Deepak Chopra. He and his son, Rabbi Menachem Wolf, have created a highly innovative and trailblazing personal growth center called Spirit Grow. And I'm sure most of you, or everyone, is familiar with that beautiful center that is leading the Jewish world in fusing Jewish spiritual teachings with wellness training, management theory, relationship enrichment, and spirituality. He resides here in Melbourne, which is lucky for us, with his wife Leah, with whom he has 7 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a number of whom are reserve officers in the Israeli army. Thank you so much, Rabbi, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you. I'm looking forward to conversing, getting your feedback, especially now that we are in lockdown here. There are advantages, and the advantages are exactly this. And imagine 100 years ago, if we were in these kind of circumstances, we wouldn't be able to see each other, speak to each other. And with the wonders of modern technology, here we are together as a community. How wonderful is that? Must always look at the positive side of every day of life and appreciate it. The theme and the topic which we're going to discuss is perhaps something that's of curiosity to all of us. And that is, who is us? And where are we afterwards? And is there an afterwards? And what do we mean by afterwards? So let me begin in this way. Let's analyze who is us. When I ask myself, I'm speaking to you right now, and the voice is vocal and you can hear me. Who is actually doing the talking? It's not my larynx, my voice box. It's not even my lips. It's not the different parts of the body, of the 5 parts of the mouth, namely the lips, the tongue, the teeth, the palate, and the throat, which form words. And I think I can prove this to you, that that's not me. You see, 5 seconds before a person dies, bis 120, we should all live to 120 and longer. But 5 seconds before, We hear, we see, please God, and yet 5 seconds after a person dies, they can no longer hear and they can no longer see. And you'll say, well, that's obvious, Laibl, because they're dead. But what does that mean, dead? After all, biologically, the body has not decomposed in 5 seconds. The physiology of the ears and the eyes remains intact 5 seconds later, and yet they're not functional. We have to conclude that something has gone missing, and it's not our body. So let's call that something our neshama, or call it spiritual energy, or just call it energy, or give it any word you want. But you and I have to agree that some element is missing. So we are a composite of our spiritual flow, our neshama, and the physical machinery that expresses it. That physical machinery is the body. And in this world of time and space, and I say this world because in our teachings, there are many parallel worlds that you and I exist in. Not going to complicate this with Kabbalistic insights in terms of the various realms, Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, and Atzilus. But this realm is the realm of time and space, body and soul. So what we say is that 5 seconds before death, the body and soul are fully integrated. But once death occurs, at that point, the two separate, and the neshama and the guf, the soul and the body, seem to go in different ways. So when I see, what is sight? That's my experience of the neshama flowing through the physiology of the eyes. When I hear, that is the human experience of the neshama flowing through the physiology of the ears. When I'm thinking, that is my experience of the neshama flowing through a very complex piece of machinery, but still only biological machinery, and that's called brain. Now I'm going to introduce the word consciousness. These experiences, sight, hearing, mind, are aspects of consciousness. What's total consciousness? When my soul flows through my whole body. And my experience of that is called consciousness. So there is a higher I than my body. We've called it the neshama. In truth, the neshama itself has levels. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. But again, I don't want to complicate this discussion. So when I ask myself my initial question, who am I? I am not my body. I am something more profound. I am the driver of the vehicle. The body is the vehicle and I'm the driver. When I speak, I'm directing my vehicle to drive in a certain direction. Likewise, when I choose to hear or see or feel or whatever our 5 senses are. So in this initial part of our discussion, all I wanted to establish is that we are a dichotomy. We're the product of two. Both are necessary. Without the vehicle, without the body, the neshama cannot function in this world of time and space, in a physical world. So Hashem has provided it with the vehicle called the body. And as we grow from babyhood forwards, what the soul tries to do is to express ideally through the body. But the body is clumsy. It's a slow learner. And it doesn't always conform. It's like it's an obstacle course. So sometimes we know what's the right thing to say and the right thing to do, and it doesn't come out that way. Why? If there's a driver behind the steering wheel, why doesn't the car, the body, drive in the direction that I want it? I want to be nice to somebody, but that person provokes me and I get angry and I start saying things that I shouldn't say. Why? Doesn't the neshama know what's right and wrong? Absolutely. So why doesn't the body conform? Well, sometimes the car has broken parts. So for example, God forbid someone loses an arm. If you lose an arm, then the neshama can't express through that arm. Although I might say, by way of a segue, that sometimes there's a phenomenon known as a phantom feeling that people have even when their limb is missing. And that's something to do with the neshama itself. But putting that aside, there are malfunctions of the body. And the malfunctions are sometimes in sight, they may be in hearing, or in the mind. And therefore, when these malfunctions occur, and they may be momentary, I lose myself, I'm provoked, or they may be long-term. I might have a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that sometimes leads to, for example, depression, clinical depression. So then I need to repair the body, whether momentarily or in the longer term, so that I can be more optimal in the way I behave. No, I shouldn't get angry at the person, never. So I have to correct myself. I have to correct the way I think. So what has this got to do with our topic at hand? What happens afterwards? Because what happens afterwards is a continuation of yourself. You continue to exist. Remember what I said? The body's the vehicle, the neshama is your identity. The neshama is the basis of your personality. The genes that you are provided in the body, the environment and culture that you find yourself in, all these various features, even early childhood experiences, they help shape the way that the vehicle operates, but you have the capacity to even overcome that. You know what we call that phenomenon? Free choice. You can choose whatever you want. Was it not Viktor Frankl, in his wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning, who noted that while the Nazis might have imprisoned his body, limited his physical freedoms, he had an absolute choice on how he was going to respond in his mind and in his heart to the circumstances. That's where freedom lies. That's the neshama. The soul has the freedom to express, but you have to choose it. And that's the obstacle course of the body. So what is death? Well, let me give you a less dramatic example. That less dramatic example is sleep. The Talmud says that sleep is 1/60th of death. It's an interesting statement. There's something about sleep that in some very, very faint way approximates death. What does sleep mean? When a person is asleep, you will agree that they behave and express very differently than when they're awake. Basically, they're dormant. There is enough life force flowing through the body to maintain their life animation, but not enough life force that allows them to behave and speak, act in a normative way. Why? And here's the interesting point. In a state of sleep, the neshama and the guf, the soul and the body, slightly dislocate. There isn't that degree of integration. Why? That's a separate discussion. That the neshama dislocates because it moves to a higher realm where, if you will, it receives a tutorial on how to continue the next day. That may sound a little flippant, but it's just a metaphor. But the point being that there's a dislocation. Let me talk about something that's less dramatic than even death. For example, when you're tired. What does tiredness mean? Tiredness means that, again, the soul and the body, the neshama and the guf, are not fully integrated. There's a bit of a slowdown in the physical parts called the body. The vehicle is driving sluggishly. The oil needs changing. It needs to go in for a service. You need to recuperate. And at the end of an active day, towards the evening, yes, the body runs down, and therefore the neshama doesn't have as ideal a vehicle to drive into this world. We feel that, we experience that as tiredness, slight dislocation. Even something more subtle, illness, sickness. You get a cold, you get the flu. You don't feel yourself. Of course you don't feel yourself, because yourself is your neshama, your soul, and it's unable to express optimally because the body is suffering to a slight extent. And therefore, our appreciation of life also suffers to that extent, slight dislocation. So what we hope for and aim for is full integration. How do you do that? Fitness of body. That's why we need to move, we need to exercise. Fitness of mind, active mind, reading, discussing, talking. And we need to have also insight, wisdom, which is the roadmap, so you know how to direct the vehicle. All these features optimize the way that the neshama expresses through the body. So the conclusion is, we are more than our body. We are our neshama. But in this world, the neshama needs the aid of the body to express. We are more profound. There's a wonderful anecdote of the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, who effectively raised his grandson, who was destined to become the third Rebbe, the great Tzemach Tzedek. But when the Tzemach Tzedek was a 5-year-old, he already was a precocious 5-year-old. And on one occasion, he was sitting on the knee of his great grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, and the grandfather was testing the prowess of his precocious grandchild. And he was playing the game as follows. He said to the grandchild, "Who am I?" And grandfather points to his head and says, "Is this me?" And the child says, "No." So grandfather points at his heart and he says, "Is this me?" Child says, "No." Points at his beard. "Is this me?" No. And so it goes on. And at that moment, grandfather is called out of the room for something that's needed. And as he's approaching the door, the little 5-year-old points to the grandfather and calls out, "That's you." Why? Because he called that Zayda, grandpa. Somewhere in calling the name of the person, you're touching the essence of the soul. What does that mean? It's a very deep notion. You know, when you have a bris of a child, or a son, or a grandson, or at the bris, I should say, and at the bris, you give the name to the child. Or for a girl, you go to shul, and at the aliyah, you give the name of the daughter or granddaughter. That moment, when you give the name to the child, you are a complete prophet and prophetess, meaning that's the singular occasion when you have nevuah, prophecy, meaning the name that you give coincides with the essence of that soul. That name is most appropriate for that soul. That's why a Hebrew name is so important. And it's in ways that we will never know why, but that name connects to that soul. And that's why naming a child is such a profound aspect of our Jewish life. So when he called that Zayda, he was touching the essence, not the body, head, heart, beard, but through the name, calling out Zayda, he was touching the essence, something to do with the soul. Let's move to the next stage of discussion. Death takes place. The neshama is dislocated from the body. Where is it? Well, of course, we speak in terms of where and when, because we're in a finite world of time and space. So we only can speak metaphorically. But let's speak metaphorically. The neshama initially hovers over the body, fully aware of it. It has its insight of the body, which we understand as sight. And at that time, the body and the neshama still have a connection. It's not as strong a connection as life, obviously. And it's not even as strong a connection as sleep, but there's still a connection. And then for the first 7 days, it still is within the realm of that connection. And we call that the days of Shiva, from the Hebrew word Shiva, 7, the 7 days. There's still a connection. And then for the remainder of the first 30 days, it moves to a higher plane. And that higher plane still has a connection to the body. And then after the 30 days, for the first 12 months, it moves even higher, whatever higher means. I can discuss that with you. But it still is in total existence, in total awareness, in a fully spiritual way, and still has a tangible connection to the body. Now I'm going to tell you a secret. It will always have a tangible connection to the body. Less so and less so as it goes on, but it will always be connected to that body in some way, spiritual manner, which is why we go to the graveside of a dear departed one, or a great one, a Rabbi, what have you, and ask them to intercede, because they are in a higher place where they can extend our wishes for us. There's still a connection. And it's because of that connection that the body is still held with reverence, holiness. If death occurs, the body remains holy, and we treat it as such. And you know the various Jewish laws on how the body is then dealt with in the initial days before burial in the most beautiful manner, and then even afterwards with great reverence. And therefore the body is, even in our lifetime, has to be treated with great respect, because there's something special about the body that allows the neshama to express through it. And that's why there's an absolute mitzvah to remain healthy, to listen to our doctors, because in our Jewish tradition, the doctors are a channel of the flow of blessings. You want the blessing to reach you? The doctor is the vehicle for that. Yes, you should choose doctors. We have the freedom of choice, and we have the ability to choose. And the Rebbe always said, choose a doctor who is a friend, which means choose a doctor who you feel is going to really care about you. but they are a medium of it. So keeping healthy is a mitzvah, no less a mitzvah than keeping kosher, no less a mitzvah than ahavas Yisrael, loving each other, and onwards and onwards. Okay, so now we've said that the neshama moves to higher places. What are those higher places? What do we mean by that? So let me introduce the next term, Olam Haba, or Gan Eden. Now, Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, was of course something tangible at the beginning of creation. That's where Adam and Chava lived. But there's a spiritual notion of Gan Eden, which is like Olam Haba, the world to come. Now, what do we mean by such a term? So I'm going to, and what do you do there? What do we do down here? What is the basis of our life here? If you were to ask me, what is the primary motivation of human endeavor? What makes us tick? What makes us get up in the morning and want to experience the day? I'm going to offer you one word. That word is connection. We want to connect with everything. We want to connect with people, especially our loved ones. We want to connect to knowledge. We want to be able to connect to a sense of joie de vivre, joy and happiness in the way that we conjoin with everything. The tool that we use is curiosity. That's part of the way that we describe our quest for the connection. But what does connection mean? Connection means that my soul reaches out through my body and touches your soul. A profound relationship is a soul-to-soul encounter. Having said that, the Torah informs us that there are 613 ways that a Jewish soul connects optimally to life itself. We call those mitzvot. Now, what's the word mitzvah mean? If you look at the word mitzvah, it's derived from the shoresh, from the root tzafta, which means connection. That's what a mitzvah means. And each soul system has its way to connect. I use the word soul system because there we are told 71 different soul systems in creation, of which Jewish is one among 71. And each one has its particular way of connecting to existence, 71 different ways. And unless each one connects ideally in its own way, you don't get to a stage of ultimate connection, which we define as fulfillment, happiness, oneg, satisfaction. Okay, having said that, when you do a mitzvah, you're actually, and excuse the way that I present this, you're actually giving yourself brownie points, a ticket to the stadium, the big football stadium in Gan Eden, where in Gan Eden and Olam Haba, you watch the spectacle on the ground. What's that spectacle called? God. How close you get to that spectacle, what seat you get, depends on your mitzvot here. When you do a mitzvah here, you're improving the seating that you have in the Olam Haba. Everyone gets a seat. Everyone. But no problem. Everyone, upon passing beyond the body, gets a seat in the stadium. All of us go to the Olam Haba. All of us go to the Gan Eden. No question about it whatsoever. It's true that the neshama sometimes needs to have a little bit of a cleansing process to be able to get to the seat. In some traditions, quite incorrectly, that's called hell, Dante's Inferno. We don't have any such notion as hell. That's not a Jewish teaching whatsoever. We simply call it, again, metaphorically, a washing machine. The neshama has to get cleaned a little bit in order to be presentable in the stadium to where one gets closer to God, much closer than here, because here the body in the physical world doesn't allow it. That's a discussion for another time. Why did God create this kind of a world? Another discussion. So what is the next stage after death? Something very beautiful. You are who you are. Every single soul has its own character, its own personality. All souls were created at the time when God created the world. They were all created then. Souls don't grow. Souls don't mature. Souls are perfect from the word go and remain so after death. You are who you are, who you are. And then there's possibilities. It may well be that the neshama, the soul, hasn't completed its agenda that God created for it when God created it. Therefore, God says, go back down again. You've got more stuff to do down there in this world of time and space. And you become reincarnated. The term Gilgul HaNefesh, literally Gilgul, cycle, from Galgal is a wheel. Gal in Hebrew is waves, round. Gilgul HaNefesh, the cycle of the soul. In English, the word used is reincarnation. Reincarnation means your same soul, not a different one, your same soul now inhabits a different body, which means you express differently. You have a different genetic makeup. You have a new environment. You have a new set of parents. And therefore, the obstacle course is not just a changed body, but a changed set of circumstances around you. And here comes another punchline. You're made to forget what your previous lifetimes were. Otherwise, they'd interfere with your mission in this lifetime. So that is one possibility. Another possibility is you've completed the mission. Your soul doesn't have to come down for more. And therefore, it keeps rising and rising higher, which is another way of saying it gets a better and better seat in that stadium, and especially gets a leap upwards when we say on your site, the Kaddish. When we say the Kaddish for the Yortzeit of a dear departed one, the neshama gets a leap forward or a better seat. What does it mean, better seat? It gets closer to even godliness. And onwards and onwards. And that's not the end of the journey. There comes another stage. And that stage is called down here, Mashiach. We call Mashiach, it's translated Messiah. Our perception of Mashiach and Messiah, because we live in a Western country, tends to be Christological through Christian eyes. Where did Christianity get the idea of Messiah, Mashiach? From Judaism, obviously. After all, Christianity is a daughter religion of Judaism. It's, if you like, a distortion of Judaism in many, many ways. We can go and discuss that one day also, which is of major interest. So what does Mashiach mean? Mashiach means that we reach a tipping point in the world where the acceleration of change becomes prolific. Now, you and I are living in a world of immense change. You and I, in our lifetime, just our lifetime, have witnessed more change in the world than the cumulative history of humankind. Think of what I just said. You have had the privilege of witnessing more change in the world than all of humanity in all of history combined. Take any feature of today's life. Speak to someone who lived 100 years ago. Do you know we can see someone across the other side of the world? Are you kidding? What are you talking about? That's magic. It's impossible. Do you know that we can actually change parts of the body? What a joke. Do you know that we can actually fly like a bird? Come on. I'll show you a plane. A plane, look at that. Thousands of tons of metal, and you're going to tell me this thousands of tons of metal is going to fly like a bird? You're kidding. You just don't know what you're talking about. You and I are living in the most wondrous world that has ever existed in the shortest period of time. We are told Mashiach is the tipping point when the rate of change in the world is such that it starts to move into a completely different plane. So if I tell you now, you know what will happen in Mashiach's times? The nature of the world will change. Our nature will change. There'll be peace on the world, for example. No one will fight. Not only that, you won't have to eat food. Because what we get from food right now, we extract the spiritual spark within the food, energize the body, and then energize the physical body. That's how we live. You won't have to. It'll be done by osmosis, by the soul itself. I'm saying to you, what you would say is, come on, that's fantastic, good stuff, impossible, sci-fi. Same way as 100 years ago, someone said to you, that's sci-fi that you could see from one end of the world to the other. A thing called Zoom. And I'm telling you, the Torah tells us that many more changes, radical changes, are about to happen because we're living in that very steep curve of change in the world, which is accelerating more and more and more. Mashiach will be an individual who comes at the right tipping point and begins to effect the changes. That's one stage. And then it becomes really different. Doesn't change where the souls are. Now comes the biggest change. And that's called Tchiyas HaMeitim. Tchiyat HaMeitim literally means the revival of the dead. Every single individual who ever lived in a body will be revived. And again, the nature of life will be even more radically different than Mashiach times. Now, I'm not going to go on and describe the content of these things, although I'm sure that curiosity has been aroused. And I'll tell you why. The Torah doesn't tell us much about that. The Torah tells us that those things will occur, but deliberately does not discuss it. Why? Because the purpose of creation isn't the world up there. The purpose of creation isn't all these phenomena. The purpose of creation is that we take the physical world and elevate it through mitzvot. You want to ask me why? I haven't got the faintest idea. You want to know why God created the world the way God created the world? You'll have to send a letter to the editor. I can't. Why did God create a world where we step on an ant and inadvertently kill it? It's no less powerful a question as to why God chose to watch 6 million Jews die in the Holocaust. I can't answer those questions. Why did God create a moment of absolute beauty when I meet my grandchild or great-grandchild for the first time? Why do I experience such an exhilaration? How wonderful. I can't answer why. Why did God create the world in that particular format? But once created, I've been given my marching orders. And those marching orders is through the manual called the Torah, and I know how to act and behave in the shortness of 120 years, which is my mission for my soul during this particular lifetime. So I'm going to end my formal presentation at this stage and allow you to perhaps raise thoughts and share with me and teach me, because as you see, I have an inadequacy of information. I keep sending you upstairs to ask letters of the editor, but to the extent that I can help and assist and respond, I'll be more than happy to. And if you want to later on ask me by email, I've put on the chat my email and you'll see it there. I'll put it down again in case you entered later, and feel free to email me. So Jackie,
yes,
by all means, moderate any questions or thoughts.
Anyone, well, I'm so happy I studied law, because I've scribbled, and writing and scribbling, and so my mind's all over the place. But would anyone like to ask a question? I know I've got thousands, but would anyone like to ask a question? Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
that's really, really profound. Lily, my mum.
I would just say that is the most beautiful, perfect talk. I loved every minute of it, and I don't have any questions.
Thank you. I've bludgeoned you into submission.
No, I love the idea of the nefesh and all the different levels. And Moshe Rabbeinu had got to the 10th one already. It's the most beautiful. I think every flower, every plant, even a stone has got some little neshama to it.
okay.
That's absolutely correct.
Anyone else?
Yes. Am I unmuted?
Yes,
You are.
Okay.
Hi, Alec.
I'm Alec. Rabbi, most interesting. I have a very good friend who has a most beautiful granddaughter. And of course, you know, when you have grandchildren, they are the best and they're the cleverest. And
Absolutely.
I've said to him on numerous occasions when he has expressed his nachas that he's getting from that granddaughter of his, I said, Paul, she has been here before.
Yes.
She has got an old soul.
Yes.
She's been around here. She is so clever and so genetic that she has got the attributes of having been around before. Is there some sense in that?
Yes, of course there is. There's some very interesting Talmudic notes of individuals who are born and not having forgotten their past lives. Very rare occurrences. And of course, these have been reported beyond the Talmud. I mean, individuals who are born and at a very young age of 4, 5, and 6 can play Mozart on the piano absolutely perfectly, never having studied piano. These things are recorded and noted. And the Talmud talks about individuals who are born and in the tender ages when they can speak are already spouting Talmudic teachings that are for advanced people. So there are such rare occurrences where the past is somehow able to transfer into the forward. Now, interestingly, you and I would say that is wonderful. And yet in our rabbinical tradition, we try to ensure that it doesn't take place. And in fact, the Talmud speaks about how the rabbis cause those individuals to forget their gifts. Won't go there, but the point being is that it sometimes complicates one's life to such an extent that it causes such tremendous sadness and upset because it's not normative. But yes, you're right. That's why a child is born and they already look at their first moments like a wizened old individual, crimply, etc., and the skin folds and the like. But yes, you can also sense it in an individual. And the answer is yes. It's more than likely, highly likely, that we're talking about someone who has lived and lived many times over before and before.
Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi, sorry, added to my question, from what you have told us today, it seems like souls never die. Is that true?
Correct. A soul has been born. It doesn't have a lifetime. Only in this world of time and space do things have lifetimes. Trees, plants, humans, even stones have lifetimes, but in a sphere where there's no time and no space, the notion of lifetime doesn't exist. The soul comes from that sphere.
I've just got one, I think it's going to be the last question, and then we'll hand over to Bella. It's probably a very simplistic question, Rabbi, but with regard to the Techias HaMetim, which could be another question you could do maybe another time, but a very simplistic question is when all those that have died come back. I'm assuming it wouldn't be in the exact same format because there wouldn't be enough space, or would we all go back to Israel? And then I've heard somewhere along the line that Israel would grow accordingly.
It's interesting, if you look at the borders of Israel as defined in the Torah, it's certainly considerably larger than now, 3 and 4 times the size, in fact. And therefore, just I'll give you a shout out to keep watching the news as to the political situation in the Middle East, because you'll find that eventually it'll be exactly as the Torah indicates where our borders will be. But the point being, you know, look at little Israel today, tiny country. Now, most of us have visited Israel, I would imagine. Is it not true that about 90%, if not more, of the country is uninhabited? Maybe 95%. You have to drive a long distance between Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv, between Tel Aviv and Netanya and Rosh HaNikra, and the vast majority is empty. So there's plenty of space for all the Jews to come to Israel, even today, let alone a greater Israel, which will be the case when Mashiach comes.
Amazing. Excellent.
Now,
sorry, Gary.
I was going to say, if you're going to wind the session up,
yes.
I just want to make a couple of comments and then do one special thing for you. The couple of comments is, I love people. I love listening to people and learning from people. And therefore, I welcome you to attend any of my Zoom classes. And if you email me, my email's there again, I put it down. I'm happy to share those with you. And they're all free of charge, and they're all just for my selfish reason that I can learn from you. So feel free to be in touch with me on that score. I also have, during lockdown, between 12 and 1, a Laibl chat on Zoom. Anyone can come on, and if they're feeling they want to ask, they're feeling lonely, or they're feeling troubled, challenged, you can just come onto Zoom between 12 and 1, and we can talk. And there's people enter into the room. We have lovely chats. You can meet people. And now the very special thing I wanted to do for you, since we are in the month of Elul, and Elul is the month of reflection, introspection, leading up to Rosh Hashanah. And the way that we alert the soul in the body is through the blowing of the shofar every day in the month of Elul. So just in the off chance that you may not have heard the shofar today, I'm going to practice with you.
Thank you so much. Thank
Rabbi?
you. I would just like to, I will now call upon, thank you so much. I would like to call upon our JNForever chair, Bella Ehrlich, to do the vote of thanks. Bella?
Well, what can I say, Rabbi? You are so thought-provoking. You speak so beautifully and so clearly. You've touched on so many issues that concern so many of us, things that we sometimes are very hesitant to talk about. The after, what happens to us, and the insight that you've given us has just been extraordinary. To think of our bodies as the machine that carries our soul. There's a lot of thought that has to go into that. And I know that I will be thinking about it for a long time to come. Rabbi, thank you so much for sharing your time, your knowledge, your worlds of wisdom and expertise with our group. And I wish everybody a safe lockdown and keep listening into JNForever and talking to Jackie. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
so
Bella.
much, and wishing you a ksiva v'chasima tova, a beautiful new year coming up.
Thank you so much. And everybody keep your eyes open and ears open. We've got a beautiful, well, we'll have more JNForever events, but we've got some JNF National webinars coming up. We've got, you may want to watch as well, Rabbi. We've got an interactive Slichot tour in Jerusalem in preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The links will go out, and we've got another event coming up about the Olympians, the Jewish Olympians that have come back. So please stay safe, stay sane. And once again, thank you so much, Rabbi. It was fantastic, and see you all again soon.
Thank you. L'chaim.
Thank